My only daughter didn't even invite me to her wedding, but she had the nerve to send me a $70,000 bill for her dream party and luxury honeymoon. That day, something inside me broke forever. I'm sitting here now, 6 months later, looking at the sunset from my balcony in Barcelona. Yes, Barcelona. The woman who once lived paycheck to paycheck, who sacrificed everything for her ungrateful daughter, is now sipping wine in Spain. But let me tell you how I got here. Because this story isn't just about betrayal, it's about the moment I finally chose myself. 23 years ago, I held my newborn daughter Sarah in my arms for the first time. She was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and eyes that seemed to hold the entire universe. I whispered to her then, "Mommy will give you everything, sweetheart. Everything." I had no idea those words would become both my greatest gift and my biggest mistake. Sarah's father left when she was 3. Just packed his bags one morning and said he needed to find himself. Found himself with a 25-year-old secretary, apparently. So there I was, a single mother with a teaching degree, working double shifts to keep us afloat. I taught high school English during the day and worked at a tutoring center at night. Weekends were for grading papers and doing laundry. For years, it was just Sarah and me against the world. I remember those early evenings when she'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework while I prepared dinner. She'd tell me about her day, about her friends, about her dreams. I lived for those moments. They made every sacrifice worth it. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she said once, maybe when she was 8. I almost cried right there at the stove. But somewhere along the way, that little girl who wanted to be like me started to see me as everything she didn't want to become. It began subtly. When Sarah turned 13, she started noticing things. "Mom, why don't you buy nicer clothes?" she'd ask. "Why do we always shop at discount stores?" When her friends came over, she'd seem almost embarrassed by our small apartment, our second-hand furniture, my sensible shoes. I'd explain gently that we had different priorities, that I'd rather spend money on her violin lessons, her summer camps, her future college fund. But I could see something shifting in her eyes. Love was slowly being replaced by judgment. By high school, the comments became sharper. "You don't understand fashion, Mom. You're so old-fashioned. You wouldn't get it, it's a generational thing." Each word was a small knife, but I told myself it was just teenage rebellion. She'd grow out of it. I worked overtime to pay for her SAT prep courses, her college application fees, her senior trip to Europe. I wanted her to have opportunities one never had. Every dollar I earned went toward building her future, while my own dreams collected dust in the corner of my heart. The irony wasn't lost on me. The more I gave her, the more she seemed to resent where it came from. When Sarah got accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship, I was over the moon. I'd never been prouder. I worked 3 jobs that summer to help cover her expenses, sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. But seeing her off to college, watching her eyes light up with possibility, it was worth every sleepless night. College changed her. Or maybe it just revealed who she was becoming. She came home for Christmas break sophomore year with a different accent, different clothes, different attitudes. She'd met new friends, wealthy friends whose parents were doctors, lawyers, tech executives. Suddenly, our modest holiday traditions weren't enough. The sweater I'd knitted her was cute, but not really my style anymore. The family dinner at our local diner was kind of depressing, don't you think? "You know, Mom," she said one evening, lounging on our old couch while scrolling through her phone, "you should really try to expand your horizons. Maybe take a class or something. Better yourself." Better myself. As if 20 years of bettering her life meant nothing. Junior year, she started dating Marcus. I met him once during Parents' Weekend, a perfectly polite young man from Connecticut whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels. He was nice enough, but I could see how he looked at our rental car, my off-the-rack dress, my nervous attempts at small talk about his family's business ventures. Sarah barely spoke to me that entire weekend. When Marcus excused himself to take a call, she leaned in close and whispered, "Please don't mention your teaching salary or our apartment. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. I was embarrassing. The final straw came during her senior year. She was home for spring break, and I'd planned a small celebration for her upcoming graduation. I'd invited a few neighbors, some family friends, people who'd watched her grow up and were genuinely proud of her achievements. Midway through the evening, I overheard her talking to her friend Jessica on the phone in the kitchen. "I can't wait to get out of here," she said. "It's all so small. So limited. These people have no idea what real success looks like. My mom still thinks $50,000 a year is good money." I stood frozen in the doorway. These people. As if the woman who'd raised her, who'd sacrificed everything for her success, was just some stranger whose values were beneath her. That night, after everyone left and Sarah had gone to bed, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not the gentle tears of a proud mother, but deep, body-shaking sobs of someone who just realized she'd become invisible to the person she loved most. After graduation, Sarah moved to San Francisco for a job at a prestigious consulting firm. Marcus had landed a position at his family's company, and they were living together in a beautiful apartment in Pacific Heights. I knew this because I followed her on Instagram, the only way I could keep track of my daughter's life. Our phone calls became infrequent and strained. She was always too busy, always rushing off to some important meeting or social event. When I'd suggest visiting, she'd make vague excuses about work and timing. "Maybe next month, Mom. Things are just crazy right now." Next month never came. I should have seen it coming. The signs were all there. The distance, the phone calls that felt more like obligations than connections, the way she'd changed the subject whenever I asked about her future plans. But I was still her mother. I still believed that somewhere inside that polished, ambitious woman was the little girl who used to curl up next to me on the couch for bedtime stories. The day I found out about the wedding, I was at school, grading papers during my lunch break. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Sarah had posted a photo, a stunning shot of her in a wedding dress, beaming next to Marcus in what looked like a vineyard in Napa Valley. "Just married my best friend. Thank you to everyone who made our dream day possible." 2 hearts. I stared at the screen, my turkey sandwich untouched, my red pen frozen in my hand. My daughter had gotten married. My only child had the most important day of her life, and I'd learned about it through social media. The comments were pouring in, congratulations from friends, heart emojis from college roommates, excited messages from people I'd never heard of. People who'd been there. People who'd been invited to witness my daughter's happiness. I wasn't one of them. I called her immediately. Straight to voicemail. "Sarah, it's Mom. I just saw your post. Honey, please call me back. I need to understand what happened." She didn't call that day. Or the next. Or the day after that. A week later, I came home from work to find an envelope in my mailbox. Official looking, with Sarah's new married name in the return address. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a formal invoice. An actual bill, printed on expensive letter stock, itemizing wedding expenses. Venue, $25,000. Catering, $18,000. Photography, $5,000. Flowers, $3,500. Honeymoon, 2 weeks in Tuscany, $12,000. Miscellaneous, $6,500. Total, $70,000. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, parental contribution requested. Payment due within 30 days. Thank you for your support in making our special day possible." I read it 3 times before the words sank in. My daughter, who hadn't invited me to her wedding, who hadn't even told me she was getting married, wanted me to pay for half of it. $70,000. More than I made in a year after taxes. I called her again. This time, she answered. "Oh, hi Mom. Did you get the invoice?" "Sarah." I could barely find my voice. "I wasn't, you didn't invite me to your wedding." "Well, it was a very small ceremony. Very intimate. We thought it would be better to keep it simple. But you want me to pay for it. It's traditional for parents to contribute to wedding expenses." Marcus's parents covered their share. Their share. As if I was just another business partner in her life transaction. "Honey, I make $47,000 a year. I can't afford." "Mom, please don't be dramatic. You could take out a loan. Or maybe use your retirement fund. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event." A once-in-a-lifetime event I wasn't allowed to attend. "I need to think about this," I managed to say. "Well, don't think too long. We have vendors to pay." She hung up. My daughter, my only child, hung up on me like I was a bill collector. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the phone call, every word of that invoice. The casual cruelty of it all kept hitting me in waves. I thought about the night she was born, how I'd held her and promised to protect her from everything. The sleepless nights when she was teething, the dance recitals where I cheered louder than any other parent, the college interviews where I waited in the car, nervous and proud and hoping she'd get everything she wanted. I thought about the Christmas when she was 12 and wanted a professional art set that cost more than our grocery budget for a month. I worked extra shifts at the tutoring center and wrapped those expensive brushes and paints with shaking hands, watching her face light up Christmas morning. I thought about the time she broke her arm in 8th grade and I held her in the emergency room, stroking her hair and promising everything would be okay while internally panicking about the medical bills. I thought about every sacrifice, every second job, every maybe next year, when friends invited me on trips I couldn't afford because every penny went to her future. 23 years of my life. 23 years of putting her needs before my own, her dreams before my own, her happiness before my own. And this was my reward. A bill. A request for payment on a celebration I wasn't worthy to attend. I got up around 3 a.m. and made coffee with shaking hands. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd done her homework, where I'd helped her with college applications, where I'd celebrated her achievements, and I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My daughter was ashamed of me. The woman who'd given her everything was now someone to be hidden, someone whose love was accepted but whose presence was unwanted. I was good enough to pay for her dreams but not good enough to witness them. The crying started then. Deep, overwhelming sobs that came from somewhere I didn't know existed. I cried for the little girl who used to tell me I was her best friend. I cried for the woman I'd become, tired, forgotten, taken for granted. I cried for all the years I'd spent living for someone else's happiness while forgetting my own. But somewhere in those dark hours, something else began to emerge. Anger. Not the destructive kind, but the clarifying kind. The kind that burns away illusions and reveals truth. I'd spent 23 years teaching my daughter that my worth was measured by what I could give her. No wonder she saw me as a resource rather than a person. No wonder she felt entitled to my money but not obligated to include me in her life. I taught her that my love was unconditional, which she'd interpreted as unlimited. I'd shown her that I would sacrifice everything for her happiness, so she'd learn to expect exactly that. As the sun rose, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to pay for a wedding I wasn't invited to. More than that, I wasn't going to live the rest of my life as someone's backup plan, someone's emergency fund, someone's afterthought. I was going to remember who I was before I became just Sarah's mom. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I needed time to think, to process, to figure out how to respond to my daughter's request. But first, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a long, hot bath. I lit candles, used the expensive bath salts I'd been saving for a special occasion, and allowed myself to just exist without worrying about anyone else's needs. When I finally felt ready, I sat down and wrote Sarah a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual letter. I must have written and rewritten it 10 times before I found the right words. Dear Sarah, I received your invoice yesterday, and I've given it careful consideration. I want you to know that I'm proud of the woman you've become and wish you nothing but happiness in your marriage. However, I will not be paying for your wedding. For 23 years, I've been your mother, your supporter, and your biggest fan. I've paid for your childhood, your education, your dreams, and your future. I've given you everything I had to give, often at the expense of my own needs and aspirations. But I will not pay for a celebration I wasn't invited to share. I will not fund a milestone in your life that you felt I wasn't worthy to witness. I hope you understand that this isn't about the money. It's about respect. It's about recognizing that love isn't just about what someone can provide for you, it's about what they mean to you. I love you unconditionally, but I will no longer accept being treated as conditionally worthy of your time and attention. I hope someday you'll understand that this decision comes from love, love for you, but also love for myself. Your mother. I mailed it that afternoon. Then I did something I'd never done before. I took a personal day and went to a travel agent. I want to go somewhere, I told the young woman behind the desk. Somewhere I've never been. Somewhere beautiful. She showed me brochures for cruises, European tours, tropical islands. Everything looked expensive and impossible. But then I remembered, I had $70,000 in my savings account. Money I'd been carefully setting aside for emergencies, for retirement, for whatever Sarah might need. Well, this was an emergency. An emergency of the soul. Show me Spain, I said. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Barcelona. I'd never been on an international flight alone. I'd never been to Europe at all. But as the plane lifted off, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, excitement about my own life. Sarah called 3 times during my layover in New York. I let it go to voicemail. The first message was confused. Mom, what did you mean by your letter? Call me back. The second was angry. This is ridiculous. You're being incredibly selfish. The third was almost panicked. Mom, please pick up. We need to talk about this. I turned off my phone and boarded my connecting flight. Spain was a revelation. The architecture, the food, the wine, the people, everything was vibrant and alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I stayed in a small hotel near the Gothic Quarter and spent my days wandering through museums and markets, my evenings at outdoor cafes watching the world go by. On my 3rd day, I met Elena at a cooking class. She was a Spanish woman about my age, recently divorced, learning to cook for herself after 30 years of cooking for her family. We bonded over our shared experience of rediscovering independence. You know, she said as we prepared paella together, I spent so many years believing I was only valuable for what I could do for others. My husband, my children, my mother. But now I cook for myself, I travel for myself, I live for myself. And I'm happier than I've ever been. That evening, I sat on my hotel balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about Sarah, about the angry voicemails I'd been ignoring, about the money she expected me to send. But for the first time in years, I also thought about me. About the woman I'd been before I became a mother, about the dreams I'd set aside, about the life I still had left to live. I was 54 years old. If I was lucky, I had 30 more years ahead of me. Did I want to spend them as someone's backup plan, or did I want to spend them as the main character of my own story? The answer was obvious. I stayed in Spain for 3 weeks instead of the planned 10 days. I extended my trip twice, using money I'd originally saved for Sarah's future. It felt rebellious and terrifying and absolutely necessary. Barcelona became my classroom for learning how to live for myself. I took flamenco lessons and was terrible at them, but I laughed harder than I had in years. I learned to order food in Spanish, to navigate the metro system, to sit alone at restaurants without feeling self-conscious. Most importantly, I learned to enjoy my own company. For 23 years, I defined myself in relation to Sarah, her mother, her supporter, her provider. But who was I when I wasn't filling that role? I discovered I was curious about art, passionate about architecture, charmed by the rhythm of Spanish life. I loved the late dinners, the afternoon siestas, the way people seemed to savor moments instead of rushing through them. On my last day in Barcelona, I was sitting at a cafe writing in the journal I'd started keeping when a man at the next table struck up a conversation. His name was David, he was from London, and he was also traveling alone. "Vacation?" he asked. "Renaissance," I replied, surprising myself with the answer. We ended up talking for 3 hours. About books, about travel, about the strange freedom of being alone in a foreign country. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in what I had to say, not as someone's mother, but as myself. When he asked if I'd like to have dinner with him, I said yes. We went to a small tapas bar, and I found myself laughing at his stories, sharing my own thoughts about the places I'd visited, the art I'd seen, the life I was discovering. "You light up when you talk about your travels," he said over dessert. "You should write about it." Write about it. I'd been an English teacher for 20 years, but I'd never written anything beyond lesson plans and report cards. But why not? Who was to say I couldn't try? When I returned home, I felt like a different person. My apartment looked smaller, my routine felt constraining, but I also felt energized in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I started a blog called Renaissance at 50. I wrote about my trip to Spain, about learning to travel alone, about discovering that life didn't end when your children left home, it just began a new chapter. To my surprise, people started reading it. Women my age who'd gone through similar experiences, who'd lost themselves in motherhood and were trying to find their way back. They shared their own stories of reinvention, of dreams deferred but not forgotten. Within 2 months, I had a small but dedicated readership. Women wrote to tell me about trips they'd taken, classes they'd enrolled in, dreams they'd decided to pursue. I realized I wasn't alone in my experience of being forgotten by the people I'd sacrificed everything for. I started planning my next trip, this time to Italy. I enrolled in a photography course, joined a book club, bought clothes that made me feel confident instead of just practical. For the first time in decades, I was excited about my own future. Sarah called me on a Tuesday evening in November, 6 months after her wedding. I was at my kitchen table, editing a blog post about my recent trip to Tuscany, when her name appeared on my phone. I'd been expecting this call, in a way. I'd seen the signs on her social media, the absence of happy couple photos, the vague posts about life transitions, and new beginnings. "Mom." Her voice was different. Smaller. More like the little girl I remembered. "Hi, sweetheart. I need to tell you something. Marcus and I are getting divorced." I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you okay?" "No. I'm not okay. I'm really not okay." She started crying then, and despite everything that had happened between us, my heart broke for her. She was still my daughter, still the little girl who'd skinned her knee and come running to me for comfort. "What happened?" I asked gently. Through her tears, the story came out. Marcus had been cheating on her with a coworker. The marriage that had seemed so perfect, so worthy of $70,000, had been a lie from the beginning. She'd found out 3 months after the wedding but had tried to make it work. I was so stupid, Mom. So incredibly stupid. I thought I wanted this perfect life, this perfect husband, but it was all fake. Everything was fake. I listened without judgment, offering comfort where I could. This was my daughter, hurting and lost, and whatever anger I'd felt seemed less important than her pain. I'm sorry I didn't invite you to the wedding, she said finally. I'm sorry about the money. I'm sorry about everything. I was so caught up in trying to be someone else that I forgot who I really was. I forgot what really mattered. What matters now is that you're okay, I said. We can work through the rest. Can we? Can we really? I've been so awful to you. I've been ungrateful and selfish and cruel. I don't know how to fix this. Do you want to fix it? More than anything. I miss you, Mom. I miss us. We talked for 2 hours that night. She told me about her job, her apartment, her loneliness. I told her about my travels, my blog, my new life. For the first time in years, we talked as two adults who cared about each other. I've been following your blog, she admitted. I've been reading about your trips, your adventures. I'm proud of you, Mom. I'm proud of who you've become. I'm proud of you too, I said. For recognizing what wasn't working and being brave enough to change it. A week later, Sarah flew out to visit me. She looked different, older, sadder, but also more real than I'd seen her in years. The polished veneer was gone, replaced by something more genuine. We spent the weekend talking, walking, cooking together. She helped me with my blog, showing me how to use social media to reach more readers. I showed her my photos from Italy, my plans for upcoming trips. I want to be part of your life, she said on Sunday morning over coffee. But I understand if you don't want me to be. I understand if I've lost that privilege. You haven't lost anything, I said. But things are different now. I'm different now. I know. And I'm glad. I'm glad you found yourself again. She flew home that evening, and we started rebuilding our relationship slowly, carefully. But this time, it was between equals. Between two women who respected each other, who had their own lives and interests and dreams. I didn't rescue her from her divorce. I didn't offer to let her move back home or to solve her problems for her. I supported her emotionally, but I let her handle her own life. It was a different kind of love than I'd shown her before. It was love that respected her autonomy while also protecting my own boundaries. It was love that celebrated her successes without diminishing my own. It was love that could exist without sacrifice, without martyrdom, without losing myself in the process. Ending. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my balcony in Barcelona, not as a tourist this time, but as a resident. I've taken a year-long sabbatical from teaching to write a book about midlife reinvention. The blog has grown into something bigger than I ever imagined, connecting women around the world who are learning to put themselves first. Sarah visits me here next month. She's doing well, she started her own business, she's in therapy, she's learning to build a life based on her own values rather than other people's expectations. We talk regularly now, but our conversations are different. They're between two independent women who choose to be in each other's lives, not between a giver and a taker. I never did pay for her wedding. She never brought it up again. The money I would have spent on that celebration, on a party I wasn't invited to, for a marriage that didn't last, I've spent on myself. On travel, on experiences, on building a life that's authentically mine. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry about the lost years, about the time I spent living for someone else's happiness. But I'm not angry. I'm grateful. Grateful for the wake-up call, grateful for the chance to start over, grateful for the woman I've become. My daughter's wedding bill was the best gift she ever gave me. It forced me to confront the truth about our relationship, about my own worth, about the life I'd been living. I realized that for 23 years, I'd been the supporting character in someone else's story. I'd been the helpful mother, the sacrificing woman, the reliable provider. But never the protagonist. Now I'm 55 years old, and I'm finally the main character of my own life. I'm not someone's backup plan or emergency fund. I'm not waiting for permission to be happy or for someone else to validate my worth. I'm living. Really living. For the first time in decades, I'm excited about tomorrow, about next month, about next year. I have plans and dreams and adventures waiting for me. My greatest gift wasn't the wedding I paid for or the sacrifices I made. It was discovering that I deserved to be celebrated, included, and loved, not for what I could provide, but for who I was. The woman who once lived paycheck to paycheck, who sacrificed everything for her ungrateful daughter, is now sipping wine in Spain and planning her next chapter. The woman who was too embarrassed to attend her daughter's wedding is now confident enough to live in a foreign country and start over completely. I'm not someone's mother first and a person second anymore. I'm a woman who happens to be a mother, but who is also a traveler, a writer, a dreamer, a lover of life. And that, I've learned, makes me a better mother than I ever was when I was just living for someone else's happiness. The sunset here in Barcelona is particularly beautiful tonight. Tomorrow, I'm taking a photography class, then meeting friends for dinner. Next week, I'm flying to Morocco for a writing retreat. Next month, my daughter visits, and we'll explore the city together, two independent women who choose to be in each other's lives. I'm not waiting for the next chapter of my life to begin. I'm living it. And it's more beautiful than I ever imagined possible. My name is Margaret, and I'm the protagonist of my own story. Finally.